So we are picking up with probably the most influential president the United States has had, Theodore Roosevelt. We're going to use a word today that is still used today. Who's been paying attention to the presidential campaign? Okay. Some of you have, all right. Hillary Clinton often uses this term to describe herself. What is it? Not muckraker, no. No. She says she's a feminist. A lot of feminists don't agree with her. Riding your husband's coattails for the last 50 years and covering up his messes doesn't really seem like much of a feminist to me, a woman standing on her own. I think a lot of the women under the age of 70 kind of agree with her on that regard. What else? Starts with a P. Progressive. Progressive. It's a progressive. A progressive is somebody who sees and works towards a perceived need. Let's say it that way. And we're going to talk about the progressive era. The progressive and the populist era are very similar. However, the main difference is that the progressives are going to work within the parties, whereas the populists did what? What did they do in 1896? What did they do? Ran their own candidate. Remember, they had their own political party. So, what is going on at the turn of the century is that big business is running amok. You have consolidation, you have increase in hours, you have terrible working conditions, you have managers that are removed because of the ability to use what? New high-fangled invention that some of you have out on your desks that no longer have cords. Telephone, all right? A light bulb makes 10-hour, 12-hour days possible. And you have all of this abuse. And what's going to happen is it's going to spur a series or a generation of political writers, W-R-I-T-E-R-S. And they're going to be collectively known as muckrakers because they like raking in the muck. Now, what's muck? How many guys have ever raked leaves? Anybody ever raked leaves? Rake leaves after it has rained. When you get down to that bottom level, Gavin, what do you got? You got something.
Just like a combination of mud and twigs and leaves.
That's right. It's a good way you could call that is what? Muck, right? Yeah. That's what it is. It's kind of some funky stuff that's kind of starting to biodegrade. It is not. It is neither dirt. It is neither leaf. It is neither twig. It is something in between all three, and it's nasty. And you don't want to actually reach down there and get it with your hands. You want to use a rake, and you want to kind of turn it over. Now, let's think about the top of that leaf pile. Now, the top of that leaf pile looks what? Looks nice, right? You want to go run and jump in it, yes? Who's ever jumped in a leaf pile? My kids have still not forgiven me that we moved from a house that had these beautiful oak trees to this new house that doesn't really have any trees, which it doesn't have any leaves, which, you've got some new growth, but it's going to take a while before you get trees this big, right? So the problem there for them is that the leaves aren't there for them to run and jump in, and of course the way I see it is what?
Less work.
I don't have to break the leaf. I like it, right? So what happens here is that you have this giant pile of leaves. It looks beautiful. It looks wonderful on the top, but then you get down into the underneath it, and you see what? The nastiness. So what's happening, these people are going to write books that are going to expose the corruption and the abuse that is happening in big business. Yes, the economy is going gangbusters, woohoo, but the people are being treated like crap. They are being used and they're being thrown away. You have the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, which we talked about a couple of weeks ago, in which it was an actual sweatshop, had no air conditioning. The women had a problem with staying in, and the bosses didn't stay in the building, and so the boss didn't like it. So what he did is he chained the doors and locked them so they could not leave during work hours. So when a fire breaks out, what happens? They can't escape and they all die. we would see the rise of popular muckrakers like Lincoln Steffens, The Shame of the Cities, Ida Tarbell, and History of the Standard Oil Company. Upton Sinclair, perhaps the most influential of these, The Jungle, we'll talk about that in a little bit, and then Thor C. Veblen, The Theory of the Leisure Class. And what this did is it really kind of poked at the people and society and showed it's not as great as you think it is. Yes, sir? Say it louder, Wilson. What?
Is this why there are so many like child labor books and stuff like that?
During this time period?
Yes.
Yes. The question is this why you see so many child labor books at this time period? Yes, because there are no rules against children working. You know what's great about children? They've got little hands. You know what's great about little hands? You've got these giant pieces of machinery, and you've got all these interlocking gears. And sometimes something falls into that interlocking gear, and it gets stuck. You know what's great? And it's a small space. You know what's great about little hands? They can reach in there and pull them out. And guess what happens when you pull that huge thing out of that gear, that little bitty child hand? It starts turning, Cody, and what happens? It either mashes the hand or the child loses the hand. And guess what? Well, okay, sorry, we don't need you anymore. And you're shoved out, and you don't have a job anymore. And you probably don't have any medical assistance because that is not something that they were required to do. So you can see there's a lot of problems here. There's a lot of problems that are occurring that people don't see. Now, Theodore Roosevelt, I told you, before he became governor of New York, he had worked for the New York Civil Service Commission, and he had reformed the police department. And as governor, he was working to reform corruption as well. And they didn't like him doing that because what? It was bad for big business. And if it's bad for big business, then it's bad for New York. So they kicked him up into the vice president position. And as he's vice president, nothing's going to happen until, oh, guess what? McKinley's dead. Now he's president. So he's going to take his progressive ways, and he is going to then turn them to these issues. He is a voracious reader. He would read like a paperback in the morning, a paperback during the day, and a paperback before he went to bed. So these are all on his nightstand to read. So he's seeing how this works out. Compounding issues is the rebirth of the Socialist Party. Now, the Socialist Party, with our good buddy Eugene V. Debs, is going to run as a third party and try to overturn the capitalist system. A lot of the things that they promoted are things that eventually have become to take place. Okay? And then we have the Progressive Party. Both of these parties are going to rally disaffected workers and business people who are being affected by big business. And what's going to happen is they, in turn, are going to try to change society. The Socialist Party as a third party, the Progressive Party working within the Republicans and the Democrats to enact change. So when Hillary said, people always try to label Hillary Clinton as a liberal, and the first thing she says is, no, I'm not a liberal, I'm a progressive. It's saying the same thing, it's just using a different term. Okay? There's nothing wrong with being a liberal. There's nothing wrong with being a conservative. All right? If you were to actually get into the meat of political theory, you would find that the United States is classically liberal. Oh my goodness. Why? Because that's the definition we fall into. We believe in things like freedom and individual rights, but we also believe that there should be some forms of controls on society, because without controls on society, you end up with anarchy. And in anarchy, you don't have an effective society. So, this is going to start providing Theodore Roosevelt, this underlying current, is going to provide Theodore Roosevelt the platform that he needs to start making changes. Now, the trusts we talked about last lecture series are starting to get to the point where they are reaching monopoly status. Case in point is the Northern Securities Company. It's owned by J.P. Morgan. Railroad map here. That's not it. Okay, here's my railroad map. Chicago is the center of the meatpacking industry. At this time period, there is a railroad company that pretty much controls the Midwest. All right? And then there's J.P. Morgan's Northern Railroad Company that controls the railroads in the West. Now, J.P. Morgan has a lot of money. He and the owner of the other company start getting into a fight over trying to control all of the railroads west of Chicago. And the way they get into a fight is they start buying up shares of the Northern Railroad Company. What it does is it artificially inflates the price of that company. You understand how stock works? If more people want stock in one company, they pay more for it. So if two guys get into a bidding war over this company, it artificially inflates it to a point that is dangerously high. It almost crashes the stock market. If it crashes the stock market, what's going to happen to our economy? It's going to plummet. Okay? So what happens is these two guys get into an argument over this, the Northern Railroad Company. J.P. Morgan wins. And he takes all of his railroads and he puts it into the Northern Securities Company. The Northern Securities Company is going to be the company that owns all of the railroads from Chicago over to the Pacific. Is that scary to you? Why? Why? It's what?
7% of the country.
67% of the country has one railroad choice. Okay, is that bad? Why?
You can choose the prices for whatever you ship on it.
Whatever he asks, you have to pay, correct? Correct? Yes. And there's not going to be any difference in prices. Well, there will be difference in prices. We'll talk about that in a minute. But we'll talk when we get there. However, there is no competition. Or what happens when you have competition?
Out.
The what?
Well, they're not big enough, so they die out and he just buys it out.
Okay. All right. Any competition that did exist would not be able to survive, and they would be able to put them out of business. Or what else? Wilson.
Competition makes prices better.
Competition makes prices go down. Competition makes prices go down. So what happens is Theodore Roosevelt is going to turn his attention to being a trust buster. Remember, trusts are companies that do not do anything but own stock. Okay? So they're companies that own other companies to get around monopoly laws. Usually they're in New Jersey, because New Jersey doesn't really care about any form of ethics. Still doesn't today. So what happens is Theodore Roosevelt directs the Federal Justice Department to bring suit against Northern Securities Company as a monopoly. J.P. Morgan gets very upset. He sends a telegraph to Theodore Roosevelt saying, if we have done anything wrong, send your man to my man and we'll fix it. There's no laws against what they've done. However, it's just not in the best interests of the American public. Now, you see how that would be considered progressive? Yeah, so you just nod your head just to get me to move on to another point.
No, understand.
Okay, thank you. All right. sometimes with people who are progressive, it's not that the laws should give way to what is right with a capital R. Follow? Okay, it's not right with the capital R. You have some moral indignation there? Okay. All right? Bernie Sanders jumped to mind. It's not right! Okay? Why? Because what is he doing? What is he proposing? It's the exact same type of stuff that we should break up these things. Well, there's no law against it, but it's not what? Right. Okay? A lot of people are happy that Antonin Scalia is dead, who was one of the greatest justices on the Supreme Court. He passed away 2 weeks ago. He was a constructionalist to the Supreme Court. And what that meant is he believed that what the Constitution said is what the Constitution meant, and if you don't like what the Constitution said, you should work to have it changed. Okay? He was really against the health care law, the Affordable Care Act, because the Constitution doesn't say anything about providing your health care. It says if you want that to happen, you need to amend the Constitution. Don't just change a law and then get 5 people on the Supreme Court to agree with you. Okay? That's mob rules. That's democracy versus a republic. Now, what's the difference between democracy and a republic? We're getting into government here, but that's all right. What's the difference between a democracy and a republic? Democracy, let's see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's not going to work. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. No, it's not going to work. Okay. All right. Typically, when there's more men than there are women in class, I say, okay, in a democracy, the majority wins. Men say, women, go make me a sandwich, and you do. Okay, but there's more girls in here than there are guys. So girls are going to say, give me a foot rub. Something else that girls like, I don't know. Go draw me a bath, something like that. The man has to do it. Why? Because it's a what? Democracy, 51% versus a republic, which is a rule of law. We make laws, we follow those laws. Okay, you don't like the laws, what do? You work to have them change. That's the difference between a democracy and a republic. Okay? So what happens here, and you can see where this progressive issue comes into effect, because it's not right means what? You believe that you're in a democracy, and therefore the rule of the people should trump what? The rule of law. And if you do that, then you've got some major problems. So anyway, the Northern Securities Company is going to be busted up. It is going to be broken up because it violated the monopoly laws that were in effect at the time. Because they controlled too much railroad. Although what he had done was not illegal under the laws, it set a bad precedent. All right? So, Theodore Roosevelt is then going to turn his attention to strengthening the Interstate Commerce Commission. You'll remember when that was passed, it had some problems. And some of the issues is that it did not have any teeth. Well, we're going to change that. In 1903, the Department of Labor is going to be created to ensure that all businesses are meeting minimum labor standards. This is a cabinet-level position to the president. It's executive bureaucracy in our national government. Now, remember how I said a second ago that everybody paid the same rates, but some people didn't when it came to the railroad companies on the Northern? One of the things that would happen is if you were a major producer and you were using railroads to get your goods to market, which, what? Most everybody did. What? You paid a certain amount. Well, guess what? If you paid a lot, and you let's say you shipped, 10 times more than anybody else. Okay? Say you ship 10 times more than anybody else. Under the rules, you're doing what? You're paying 10 times more than anyone else because it's paid per use. What would happen is the company and you would come to an agreement and they'd say, you use us 10 times, we're only going to charge you for 5. We're going to give you a rebate. Okay? We're going to give you a refund on 5 of them. We're only going to charge you for 5. in 1903, the Elkins Act is going to make that illegal. Now somebody raises their hand and says, well, wait a minute, Mr. Franke. I just put together a new computer. I built it from scratch, and it had all these rebates. You know, power supply got a $25 rebate. Case was a $10 rebate. CPU was a $15 rebate. What's the deal there? How is that not a violation of the Elkins Act? Those are rebates. Absolutely, you are correct. But what's the problem? Parker, what's the problem here? What's the difference?
The companies that are giving rebates now aren't as powerful.
Okay, that's true. Yes, very good point. It's not exactly where I'm looking for. What?
It's not just the one.
Thank you, Ethan. It's not to one person. It's available to everyone. Parker, you walk in and you buy that equipment, and Ethan walks in and buys that equipment, you have the same opportunities for those rebates. Yes. However, it was only Ethan shipping those goods, and because Ethan was shipping those goods, what? He was the one that was getting it. Now, if you ship 5 times more than anybody else, and he still ships 10 times, you're paying that amount. It's not fair. So what's going to happen is rebates are going to be made illegal. Then in 1906, the Hepburn Act is going to give the power to the Interstate Commerce Commission to subpoena records of these businesses to see that they are, in fact, making sure that rebates are not being given, that pools are not being given, kickbacks are not being given, that they are in compliance with the existing laws. Now, I like this cartoon because it shows Uncle Sam here with a trust, and the trusts are always kind of portrayed as an octopus, okay? And so it has many arms, it's in many different things. And so here he has a buzzsaw that says legislation buzzsaw, and he has platform planks over here. And the trust is right here, and he's going to try to break up this trunk. He's going to cut it into little bitty pieces. And so he's got the legislation buzzsaw going, and Uncle Sam, being the epitome of the American public, is kind of stroking his goatee, and he says, will it hurt the octopus? Is he the right frame of mind? No, it's not an issue of hurting the octopus. It's an issue of breaking up these companies to ensure competition and to ensure that monopolies do not exist. Yes, Courtney?
I just have a question of what this word means. What is
Subpoena. That means when you have to turn over your records to a federal or state authority. Okay? You see it a lot of times when people are, if you are a witness to a crime, you'll get subpoenaed. It's an official document, and then they'll be very aggressive to you. You have to actually have to give it to you. You have it, and you take it. And once you have it, it's illegal. It's legal. You've got it, and they can say she's got it. And it's an order saying you must give us these files stating this, and this. These days, it's an official order from a legal authority. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for asking. All right, so The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. Who's ever read it? I love it. All right, Parker's read it. Yes? Okay. I love reading The Jungle. All right, my favorite part about The Jungle is when they're talking about the meat packing industry in Chicago. If you've never read The Jungle, it's a great book. It's probably about 300 pages. Won't take you very long. But it's a great book written by Upton Sinclair, probably his best work. In this, he talks about this family that immigrates to the United States. They come in, then they settle in Chicago. When they arrive in New York, they're sold this house for a really cheap price, and they show them a picture of this house, and it is beautiful. It's brand new. Well, they buy the house, they move out there, they get to the house, and what do they discover? It's an old, rundown, beat-up, nasty house, but because they've already paid the money down and the contract, what? They have to live there, okay? All right, so one aspect of it is this man who is the lead character has trouble keeping jobs because he doesn't speak English. And so he has trouble keeping jobs, and he gets a job in the in a slaughterhouse. And his job is to go through the slaughterhouse floor with a broom, and he pushes all the cuttings, the excess fat, the skin, the hide, the pieces that aren't used, and they are. He pushes them and he just cleans the floor. All right. Well, all the stuff falls to the floor, and so does the blood and guts and organs and stuff in the organs, and it falls to the floor. All right. Now, what is going to happen on a regular basis when this occurs? What is it going to attract? Mice and rats, right? Mice and rats. Okay, and with mice and rats come, and what else? What do they leave behind? They leave their little pellets behind, right? Okay, and so what happens is his job is to push this broom. So he pushes all this broom, and he pushes this broom, and he pushes this broom, and he cleans it up, makes sure everybody's workstation is really good. Pushes it up. Pushes it around, pushes it around, pushes it around, pushes it around. And he gets to this one spot, and he pushes it into this hole. He pushes it in this hole, this wall. He pushes it into this hole, this wall. He thinks it's gone. It's not gone. What it does is there's another person on the other side of that wall, and that person takes all that stuff up, and they take it and they put it in this giant compressor. And this compressor compresses all of this junk and makes it into what is known still today. What? What?
Spam?
It's deviled ham. Yes. Which is spam. Okay? So you have rat droppings, probably little baby rats, their fur, mud, all that stuff, and it's compressed into it. Jonathan, you working today? You're not going to look at that deviled ham the same way, are you? Yes, do it. Why is it illegal? Why isn't it illegal? Because we don't have any laws about it. We don't have any laws about it. Oh yeah, we have laws about it today, but we don't have laws about it. We don't have laws about it at that time period. So what's happening is, there's no rules. If there's no rules, you can do whatever you want to. Well, my favorite scene in the jungle involves how they get the meat off of the carcasses. So they get these cows in, and if you think about it, these cows are shipped in from the cattle drive. They get to Chicago. They're not inspected. You don't know if that cow is sick or it's got some, let's say it's got a wound, and that wound has developed into a pus, and it's infected and it's running down its arm, down its legs or something like that. And, this guy comes in, and his job is to kill the cows. So he comes in, and he's got his knife, and the first thing he does is slices their throat, and their blood's just shooting out everywhere. They die. And another person comes along with a meat hook, and he takes it, and he stabs it into the cow. It's a cow. Why are you upset about Gita? Allergy to hamburger recently? Well, then there you go. Okay. So stabs it in with this hook, and it pulls him up, and it has him like this, and then it takes him to this giant room. This giant room is huge. It's a giant room. And it's enclosed. Okay? And around this room is this giant vat of water. Okay? So what happens is they take them all into this area, and then they drop them into this vat of water. It's boiling water. This boiling water is going to do what to this cow? Well, it's already dead. What's it going to do? It's going to boil off the meat. The meat's going to do what? It's going to float to the surface. Right? Okay? So around this giant vat of water is this lip, probably about this long, where these guys would stand on the side and they had these spears. And what would happen is this meat would float up to the surface, they'd spear it, and they'd put it over on the side. And on this conveyor belt, the conveyor belt would take it to where they would get the T-bones and the New York strips, whatever aspect they want of it. By the way, did you know that McDonald's is the #1 purchaser of cow eyeballs in the world? What is that? Hey, they're 100% all beef. What does beef mean? Cow. That's it. Doesn't mean anything else. It means cow. Okay?
Where'd you get that statistic from?
I know
Like,
these.
sue them?
Why would you sue? They're telling you what it is.
No.
You really want a hamburger now? Okay, it's going to get a little bit better. All right. Or is it
Really, if
good?
I tell somebody that and they look at me like I'm crazy, where can I say that it's
Huh?
wrong? I just made it up.
You're your college professor, right? Okay, so this is what happens. Who's hungry? Anybody hungry? All right, okay. So what happens, now you think about it. This is what you have. You have a cow come in that is got some form of disease. It's not inspected. It is brought into this area, it's dropped in there, and it's just, the meat's boiled up, it's speared, it's put off over the side. Now think about this room. Think about the room that you have, okay? If it's an enclosed room and the water is kept at perpetual boil all the time and the water is refilled, what's going to happen to the room? What's it going to be? It's going to be hot, what? Steamy, okay? So you're not going to be able to see things very well, all right? So in the jungle, there's this one scene where they're talking about the yearly draining of this vat. Yes, the yearly draining of this vat. And as they're draining it, they have all these cow skeletons at the bottom. They find 2 human skeletons. That sucks.
Did they make this into a movie?
I don't know if they made it into a movie. They probably have. But anyway, what happens is, you think about it, you've got this little lip on the side. It's stainless steel. It's steaming. What happens? You slip. Smack into the water. Nobody hears you scream because it's boiling. You're already dead. What happens? Your meat boils off your body. They stab it. They put it on the conveyor. Theodore Roosevelt is reading a book one morning. He's reading The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. And he comes across this and he throws out his sausage that he was eating. First thing that he works on that day is that something must be done about this. So as a result, the Meat Inspections Act of 1906 is passed. Meat Inspections Act says that all meat that is going to be slaughtered must be checked by a government official to ensure that there is nothing wrong with it. Yeah, you don't want a cow with mad cow disease, or it's got some form of, missing an eyeball, or it's got some type of infection in it. Yes, ma'am.
So would people just randomly die from eating, like if the rat had a disease or something and it got in the meat, or if they ate meat with cow?
Would they randomly die from it? Probably not. They'd probably get very sick.
And no one would.
Nobody would know. It's kind of like the Bluebell issue from last year with listeria. It's been going on since 2009, or at least, or 2008. The only problem is nobody ever died until those 3 people in the same area at a nursing home died, and one of the complications was from listeria. And they said, well, what's the combination? It's really interesting. There was I think it was a 60 Minutes documentary about it a while back. And anytime that something like that comes out, listeria death, they try to, it has to be reported to the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta. And so they interviewed the person who put it together. And he was like, they get one from this area, one from this area, one from this area, and there was no correlation. They couldn't figure out where the listeria was coming from. And then these 3 people had it, and they died, and they said, okay, there's got to be something that happened here. And what it was is that it was a nursing home where they had given them Bluebell ice cream, and they tested the ice cream and discovered that listeria in it. Because you don't die from listeria. You die from complications from being sick and an already weakened immune system. It's like dying from AIDS. You don't die from AIDS. You die from a weakened immunodeficiency, immune system. All right? It sets the stage. So the Meat Inspections Act is going to take care of that. You can't just slaughter any meat. There's standards that the meat has to meet. M-E-A-T has to M-E-E-T to do this. Good pun.
That was like dad joke.
That was a good one. I'm a dad, so. So what happens here is the same day the Pure Food and Drug Act is issued. It says that you have to have certain guidelines for food to meet pure food qualifications. Now, what's it today? What is pure food and drug? Well, the FDA ensures, but what's the guideline? One of the things that I love most is, and I'm hypoglycemic, so I have to watch what I eat. I can't have that much sugar. And so I have really good willpower to avoid sugar. But one of the things that is my all-time weakness is cookies and cream chocolate bars, Hershey's chocolate bar. They're fantastic. Love them. Okay. It's funny. I'll tell the story, and students run into me 15 years later. I had this girl who was my dental hygienist. She goes, "You look familiar. Where do I know you?" And I run through the place. I think you're my government teacher. Okay, so I'm thinking cookies and cream Hershey's bars. Yeah, that's me. And so she said, so anyway, so that's my weakness. All right. So what happens is I love those, bars about this big, about 3 ounces, right? A 3 ounce bar about that big. What qualifies as pure food for that today, 2016? What qualifies for that?
So, no more than like 3 ounces.
No more than 3 cockroach legs or 1/2 of a cockroach body
For a while.
to qualify as pure food. Remington's not happy. How many guys like eating chunky peanut butter? I will not eat chunky peanut butter because you have no clue what that thing you're biting into that is crunchy is. Okay, blended, I will eat smooth because you know what? The texture is all the same. You're good. All right. I don't want any more. That's all I need to know. But you can see there's a lot of changes here. Theodore Roosevelt is working against big business to try to reform it, to make it better for the American people, the average American people. You can see why he's progressive. He's a member of the progressive wing of the Republican Party. Now, usually when you hear of Theodore Roosevelt, and I was thinking I should have looked this up earlier, is you've probably from a very young age been introduced to some of the things that he did. If you have ever seen the Bugs Bunny cartoon where he and Yosemite Sam get into a battle in the Old South, and it involves a piano with dynamite, you're nodding your heads, yes, that the character Bugs Bunny plays is Theodore Roosevelt. He gets up to one point, he says, he hits Yosemite, he goes up to Yosemite Sam, he says something quietly, then he pulls out this big stick and hits him like a country mile, and he says, "Speak softly," the character, speak. That's Theodore Roosevelt. His next thing that he's known for is the square deal. All right? Is the square deal. And this comes about in an attempt to protect labor. In 1902, in Pennsylvania, there is a coal mine. It is an anthracite coal mine. Anthracite coal is a very dense coal that burns very long. In 1902, this is the primary method of heating homes in the United States. In 1900, the anthracite coal miners had gotten a 10% increase in their salary. In 1902, they wanted another increase, another 10% increase. Well, the owners of the anthracite coal mine said, no, we're not going to allow that to happen. So the workers of the anthracite coal strike were members of the United Mine Workers Union. And the United Mine Workers Union is going to shut down the coal mine. One of their demands was for a closed shop. What a closed shop is that only people who are members of the United Mine Workers are allowed to be members, are allowed to work at this mine. Now, how many of you guys, I was going to ask you, Jonathan, I told my wife I was going to ask you this. Does Kroger have a union? Are you a member of the union? You are? Okay, you have the choice to be a member of that union. You do. Okay, see, we are in Texas. In Texas, we are a right-to-work state, which means that you cannot be forbidden from working at a company because of it being a union business. Now, in some states, you have to be a member. That would be that union, and that would be considered a closed shop. Jonathan in Texas works at Kroger. As a result, he is a member of a union, but at his own choosing. All right? So the United Mine Workers are trying to get the labor union, the workers, a 10% raise. And, of course, the United Mine Workers said, we also want a closed shop. Now, what's the problem with wanting a closed shop?
Because basically they control the entire business.
They would control the entire business. And they are generating their own survival because everybody that works there is going to have to be a member of them and of this union, and then they're going to have to pay that fee to be a union member. So, this is what happens. The business owners say, no, we're not going to do it. The miners say, we're not going to work. We're on strike. Business owners say, fine, we don't care. God is on our side. Okay, you always want to be careful anytime you say God is on your side, because you better make sure that He is. All right? Did they prove God was on their side? No. And when something like that plays in the media, it doesn't go over well. The workers, actually the mine owners, contact Theodore Roosevelt and say, we want you to come in and bust up the strike. Come in here, break up the strike, and put these guys back to business, back to work. Theodore Roosevelt says, no. If I'm going to do anything, I'm going to send the army in, and the army's going to go, and they're going to work in the mine, and you're not going to get any money, business owners. We're going to take it over, and we're going to provide coal to the American people because winter is coming, and Americans need their coal. Okay? So what happens is Theodore Roosevelt says, what I'm going to do here is we're going to sit everybody down. We're going to sit them down, and we're going to talk. And they talk, and they come up with a deal. The deal is the mine workers go back to work. They get a 10% raise. However, for that 10% raise, they're going to work an extra hour a day. So the business owners are happy. The miners get more money. They're working an extra hour a day. And then the anthracite flows to markets. Theodore Roosevelt, when he comes out, he says, with this deal, he says, everybody in this got a square deal. Okay, if you got a square deal, nobody got better than somebody else. It's perfectly square, right? So the square deal is the way he views dealing with people in business and labor.
So is
Everybody needs to get the same thing. It's a square deal.
this,
Yes.
is a square deal that all the things they got, like the regular
Yes.
prices we have.
But a square deal is, think about it, it's not a rectangular deal. A rectangular deal, what? Somebody would get more than somebody else. It's a square deal. Everybody gets the same amount. So he's known for the square deal as well. Now, this brings us to the election of 1904. Now, did he win the election of 1900 as president? No, he did not. He did not win the election in 1900 as president. He was vice president. So this is his first term. The Republicans are going to nominate Theodore Roosevelt, and the Democrats pretty much just phone it in. They phone it in, and they nominate Judge Alton Parker. Old geezer. William Jennings Bryan says, I'm done. We're not going to deal with it. Don't even mention free silver. No, I don't want to deal with it. I mean, come on, he's already lost twice. As you can see, the Democrats win what? The Solid South. Solid since when? Reconstruction ends. Still the case, isn't it? Theodore Roosevelt wins his own term, and he wins it handily. As a result, he's going to turn his attention to things that are very important to him. One of those is something that I believe, is it tomorrow or is it tonight? The George Bush. There's two. There's one tomorrow and there's one Thursday. The one on the National Conservation is, I think, tomorrow. And the one after that on the Persian Gulf War is later, right?
So you have to go to Jordan Bush Library.
You don't have to.
I mean, to do the experiment.
Yes.
Okay.
So the first thing he's going to do is he's going to, he actually already started, sorry, is in 1902, he had pushed through the Reclamation Act of 1902. And what this does is it is going to reclaim land that had been set aside, and it's going to be used for dams and irrigation projects, to build dams and irrigation projects out west. When you think of the West, what do you think of? You think of great fertile fields and lands? No, what do you think of? You think of dirt. You think of desert. You think of places where it's hard to get water. So he's going to try to figure out ways that we can protect this land. Theodore Roosevelt was a wonderful conservationist. Now, which is going to be rather humorous when we get a little further. But you have to understand his definition of conservation. Okay? He would recall, through the creation of the federal forest reserves, would recall from public lands 150 million acres of land and set it aside as national forests. Okay? One of the problems with big business, he sees, is that they are unrestrained and they are using our natural resources. And those natural resources, in many instances, are non-renewable. So he says we need to set them aside. And we need to make sure that there are lands set aside so our children can go into the forests and enjoy nature. One of my favorite places to camp is the Sam Houston National Forest in Huntsville. It's a great place. It's a lot of pine trees. You often have alligators come out of the lake. You've got to watch out for that. But it's a great place to go to ride, to hike. It's a fantastic place. It was created by the Federal Forest Reserve. The National Conservation Commission was created to try to assemble facts that were needed to promote the conservation of these lands, to administer these lands. One of the things I've been talking about, I don't know if I talked to this class about it. I know I did the last class about it, is last semester I presented a paper on a dam and lock system that was built on the Brazos River. Now, you'd probably be just right outside a town from us. Now, if you grew up in Bryan College Station, you're probably saying, what are you talking about? There is no such critter. Oh, yes, there is. If you go and you look at Google Earth and you look at, you go find where the Brazos River crosses 105 and you look up about 4 miles, you will see the destroyed remnants of a dam and lock system. And it was built to try to get steamboats as far north as Waco on the Brazos River. It failed. It was a disaster. But it was done. They spent about $3 million on it. In fact, during that time period, it was a lot of money. And the reason they did that is because at the time period, Waco was the largest inland cotton shipping center in the world. Because all the cotton that was created in or was made in the Brazos Valley shipped to Waco because that's where all the railroads went. Okay? But the problem is that the railroads were not able to ship all the cotton to market. So in the Inland Waterways Commission, Theodore Roosevelt charged this group with finding ways to maximize our natural water resources so that we could more easily ship things to market. Now, the paper that I presented, it's not the water that destroys this plan. When this dam system was first proposed, it was proposed in the 1870s. They started building it in 1905. And by the time we run into by the time it gets built in the 1920s, it's useless. You know why?
Interstate move?
What?
Do they interstate move to another town?
No. You know why? Something comes along. It was built to try to cut into the monopoly that railroads had. And you know what? And something does cut into the monopoly that railroads have. Wilson? Cars. Cars. Trucks weren't even envisioned when they started building this thing. And as a result, the natural waterway looked as a great way to get goods to market. But the problem was it would take 2.5 weeks to get from Waco down to the Gulf, which is about 290 miles. In 1917, you can go that distance in a truck in 3 days. Now, I know you guys are like 290 miles in 3 days. Back then, that's hauling. But Theodore Roosevelt is the one who sets this up to try to make best use of our internal waterways. The Land Act of 1909 is going to set aside land, is going to give land, but only on the surface. Mineral rights are going to be retained by the government. Mineral rights are going to be retained by the government. And then in 1908, the White House Conference is going to charge states with helping him accomplish these conservatory goals. Now, Theodore Roosevelt is known as such a conservative and such a gentleman that I bet there's some aspect of him that you do not realize infects your life as well from a very young age. In his second term, Theodore Roosevelt goes on a hunting trip. And while he's on this hunting trip, he comments to his friends, I want to say he's in Mississippi, that he would love to hunt a bear. He's never hunted a bear. So he goes and he's out with his friends camping on a hunting expedition, and he falls asleep. The next morning, he discovers that his friends have trapped a bear cub, and they've tied it to a tree. And they bring it to Theodore Roosevelt. They bring Theodore Roosevelt to this bear. He says, look, we got you a bear. Shoot it. You're going to kill your bear. And he says, no. And then he says, no, I'm not going to shoot a defenseless animal, a defenseless little bear. And this picture is drawn relating this image, and it's in all the newspapers. And a company in Vermont says, that's cute. What we're going to do is we're going to make a stuffed animal and market it as the teddy bear. If you've ever had a teddy bear, it comes from Theodore Roosevelt and this incident. And I know all of you have. Let's be real. Yeah.
What? So
Yes.
there is no backlash from Congress or the Supreme Court or anything like that for the federal government to own state land? Like,
Federal government, okay, no. Okay, first off, that's a very good question. There's only one there's only one state in the union that owns its own state land, and that is Texas. The reason for that is that when Texas came into the union, part of the agreement with all the other places where they came, territories where they came into the union, was that you would give over your debts that you had during territory status. The federal government would roll it into their federal debt, and then you in turn would give them all of the land that you had that was held, in the public. And the public held it. All right. Texas is different because we come into the union as a state. We come into the union as a independent nation. So when we joined in 1845, we're excited because we got like $12 million in debt, and we are going to give up our public lands, and we are going to give up our federal debt. We're going to give our debt to the federal government. We don't have to pay it. That's great. Anybody got a credit card? Who would love it? I'm glad no hands went up. Very smart of you. Okay. I recommend never getting one. But what happens here is wouldn't you like somebody else to pay your debt? Yes, you would. So what happens here is we show up and we're like, aha, here's our public lands. They say, all right, let's see your ledger. Pull up in our ledger and look at it and go, whoa, you're $12 million in debt. Like, yes, we know. You're going to take it. But that's 3 times the federal debt this time period. Yes, we know, aha, take it. They say, no, no, no. You keep your public land and you keep your debts. We had to pay off our debt ourselves, which isn't that big a deal because in 1850, the Compromise of 1850, Texas gets that amount of money to agree to look like we do today and not like what we did when we first joined the Union with going up into Nebraska. Okay? You ever seen a map of what Texas looked like when we joined, before joining? Let's see what that would have been. Yeah, there's the road. Like right there, all the way up to the top. Now, the reason we did that is because it was slavery. Because we cut slavery off right there. You can't have a free slave state. That would be a problem. So what happens is we keep our state land. Okay, we keep our public lands to ourselves, which is good because eventually they find oil underneath it, and the federal government says, oh, maybe want it back. You might be sorry. Which is why, again, on all these things are connected. If any of you write on my evaluation, he jumps around. I'm not jumping around. These are all connected things, which is why A&M and UT are so big compared to all the other institutions because they get the money that comes from our oil deposits. 2/3 to UT and 1/3 to A&M. All right. So, a lot of things happening. A lot of things happening during this time period. Make things even more interesting, we're going to see some innovation. We're going to see a man by the name of Henry Ford who's going to bring to the masses for the first time the automobile. The automobile had been around for several years. However, it was not really very obtainable. It was too expensive. They were all built by hand, and they took a long time to build. As a result, they were very few and far between. Henry Ford is going to create the Model T, and he's going to revolutionize the building process with the creation of the assembly line, where everybody does one part. Your job is to put the steering wheel on, and the vehicle moves down the line. All you do all day is put the steering wheels on. When they first came out, they sold for $850, which is still pretty expensive. And only men could drive them, unless you were really, really ripped as a female, because at the very front of these, you had this little starter, and it was a crank. You had to crank it. And then what happened is you had to let it go, and that thing would break your arm if it hit you. So you see guys, hey, badge of honor, yeah, I broke my arm on my Model T. And so what happens is eventually they're going to put a self-starter on it, so which is kind of like what you have. They put the key in, turns it on, car starts itself. This is going to revolutionize things in the exact same way that it does away with the need for steamboat traffic along the Brazos, because now we have roads that get you to the Gulf quicker than a boat can take you. You have competition with railroads. Henry Ford said he would paint you any color of Model T that you wanted, as long as it was black. He only allowed Model Ts that were black. And the reason for that is because if you choose a different color, it takes longer for them to be made, and as a result, he didn't want to do that. So with mass production, you're going to see these created. And of course, in 1903, at Kitty Hawk, you have the Orville and Wilbur Wright are going to build the first airplane. Now, airplanes are neat. They're a novelty. They're not going to actually be used for anything really until World War I. And then after World War I, they're going to be used, and during World War I, they're going to be used as weapons. And afterwards, you're going to have a whole slew of pilots that are trained with a skill, but there's really nothing for them to do with it. as a result, what you're going to see is, we'll talk about after World War I, is Congress is going to create, or is going to make mail delivered by airplanes, and so give these people some jobs. In 1907, we're going to go through another economic panic, and there's a lot of reasons for this. One is because of the Klondike gold rush. They had discovered so much gold and it had been pumped without control into the economy that it deflated growth. Excuse me. 1906, the San Francisco earthquake does approximately $3 billion in damage to San Francisco. And the ramifications from the destruction of both economies in Japan and Russia during the Russo-Japanese War are going to have a telltale effect on us as well. Now, Theodore Roosevelt is going to be blamed for this because of his progressive policies. All of the things that he had done to try to control trust, to control what you eat, to make sure that what you're eating is in fact beef and not human. Remington. Let's go to McDonald's after this. That'd be fun. They say these limits that have been placed on us and in our economy are destroying it and have caused this terrible collapse to occur. Now, Theodore Roosevelt would argue back, saying that it wasn't him, that it was in many instances it was the trusts themselves and the way they played these games, trying to win control over significant aspects of the economy. But what comes about from this is the start to a modern economy for the United States. Remember, we have not had the Bank of the United States or any form of centralized government control on our economy since the 1830s. We had attempts, but nothing really central. So in 1908, Congress is going to issue the Aldrich Act. The Aldrich Act. And the first thing it's going to do is it's going to allow national banks to issue their own currency. Remember, paper currency is not allowed. And what's going to happen now is we're going to say, okay, if you're a national bank, if you qualify as a national bank, you can issue paper currency for 6 years. It also established the National Monetary Commission, and this National Monetary Commission was going to study banking and currency problems and recommend changes. Would study it for 5 years and then would recommend changes. The end result would be the creation of the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, which is our modern method of controlling our economy and controlling our money. What? End result is the creation of the Federal Reserve. We'll talk about that in 1913. Now, probably the greatest thing Theodore Roosevelt did on the national stage involves the Great White Fleet. He wanted to do something spectacular to finish off his presidency. He had promised in 1904 that he would not run for another term. Now, granted, that would be his second elected term, but he would have been in office since 1901 because McKinley died so soon after winning. So what he proposes is a monumental challenge. He proposes that 16 ships of the United States Navy, broken up into 4 different battalions, coordinate and conduct a round-the-world circumnavigation of the United States Navy. Okay, the Navy is going to go around the world. this is going to be a logistic nightmare. The fact that this could be pulled off, if this could be pulled off, nobody believed it. Remember, Russia had been defeated by Japan when they tried to send their fleet around Africa and sent them into battle. Now, he is proposing you doing the same thing, going all the way around the world and going down through the Straits of Magellan at the port, at the tip of South America. Now, down there, the winds never hit land. You understand? Because there's no land down there. They are vicious winds. Who's ever read Rime of the Ancient Mariner?
I read Song from Iron Maiden.
Okay, I'll take that. And what's the bird in question? It's an albatross. Okay, albatrosses never touch the ground because they live always in the air because they live in that area and they just constantly fly. Roosevelt said, "I'm going to do this." Congress says we're not going to pay for it. He says, "Fine." December 16th, 1907, they leave. They get halfway around the world, and he runs out of money. He goes to Congress and he says, "I need more money." They said, "We told you not to do it." And he says, "Fine, I'll just leave the Navy there." They give him the money. Arrives back, 16 ships, 20 ports of call, 43,000 miles. A lot of this is a goodwill tour. One of it, and also kind of a little, hey, look, we're here too. Japan is acting pretty aggressive. We show up in Japan with 16 battleships, top of the line. Painted white, which means what? Peace. And the Japanese go out of their way to show how much they want to be our friend. They wave American flags. They host banquets for us. Theodore Roosevelt is there on February 22nd, 1909, when the fleet returns at Hampton Roads outside of Virginia. When he meets the fleet, he gives a speech, and he says, "Other nations may do what you have done, but they'll have to follow you. The United States is the first to do what they did." A Navy coordinated, sent around the world, arriving at the same time. It's a major feat and one of his lasting legacies. Now, he is not going to run for another term, and I think since we're out of time, that's an excellent place to end the class.